And this work is kind of challenging that point of view in a way that when you look at it from the front, it becomes quite subdued, quite quiet, and you get little hints of the work itself from the reflected colours coming off the tops of the cubes and the sides of the cubes, playing about and encouraging the viewer to move around the work and engage with the work in the space in which it sits. So it becomes much more about your engagement with the moment at that time and space, with the light that it is in that architecture, and you become much more self-aware of your presence with something at a moment. So that's it's quite a formal exploration about looking at artwork and looking at painting in particular, even though these works are quite sculptural in form. They're very, very much about that critical engagement, and also the colours, the use of colours to hint at space beyond the flat two-dimensional surface of painting, and also the shift in the colour from light to dark, an encouragement to pull the viewer's eye across the work from one side to another, and encourage that exploration around the space in which the work sits. And I'll just come back away from that a little bit. As you can see there. Okay, I shall move around. We're in the main space here at the Zoological Gallery. Moving around to the event work, which is, this one's called Upon Westminster Bridge, which is based about the poem written by Wordsworth. And all of these event works play about with a book or a novel, and the first 10 words from that book and novel are taken away, and the letters are then scattered randomly around. Let's see if I can zoom in onto one here for people to actually see. But if you can see on the back of that white one, oh, there's one up here. You see an M on the back there, randomly scattered around the works are these letters, and the whole idea about the playing with the first 10 words and the idea of the poem is to draw people's attention to the idea that we've all got access to those 26 letters of the alphabet, that we've all got access to those 26 letters of the alphabet, but it's the collection of life moments, events, both tragedies and happiness that exist in an author's life, that allows them to sit down and write those books or those novels. And I suppose with Upon Westminster Bridge with William Wordsworth is there's not, I mean, the poetry pieces, there's 3 pieces in here that are about poetry. These are quite tied into individual moments, like with Upon Westminster Bridge, where he talks about the standing at 6 o'clock in the morning on Westminster Bridge, looking across the heart of the British Empire at the time, which was the City of London, and seeing the sunrise first thing in the morning, looking across the landscape. And of course, the City of London in those days was a landscape that expanded straight into the countryside. It wasn't the metropolis that it is today. So within the work, there's hints of these colours from the city itself. There's some greys from the buildings and the roads, there's some yellows from the sunlight. So I'm trying to play about with those moments and capture that idea of that 6 o'clock in the morning early rise. But that's in there, but these individual balls are much more about the individual collected moments of the author's life that have allowed them to get those words and stand there and write that poem. And if you look at Wordsworth's life, he was born in Cockermouth in the Lake District, and his father was a legal representative for a duke in that area, and was almost pretty much estranged from Wordsworth. His mother died when he was quite young, and although he was very close to his sister Dorothy, when his mother died, they were pretty much separated for about 9 years straight before they saw each other again. And Wordsworth himself was sent off to stay a large portion of the time with his mother's family. and his uncle that was there, and he hated it and fell out with him so much he actually contemplated suicide whilst he was staying there. So all of these histories and stories of authors are all present in those little moments that allow them to pull those 26 letters that we've all got access to actually sit down and write those words. If I can move briefly over to Lord of the Flies, which is another event work by William Golding. And again, it's with these particular works, I approach a lot of my work from different levels of engagement from the, and when you look at these, there's an initial visual dance, bouncing about of the colours. Your eye gets drawn around the works. Some of the bright colours popping out with their patterns initially, then gradually the darker colours coming across. And they're meant to be very playful. And if people engage with them just purely on that visual dance and that colourful engagement, then that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. But there's more to be found. There's those more ideas of the history of the author and the history, the theoretical ideas behind the work itself to find at a later date. So there's different levels in which they operate, which is important to me as an artist anyway. And it's like with William Golding, he's this Lord of the Flies, one of the events that in his life that he talks about as an inspiration, or that he went back to view, was when he was a teacher, and he split his class of boys into two and basically told them to fight each other. And it was out of that out of that mayhem and that survival of the fittest and the strongest, and the raw human nature and need to survive from the individuals in a brief moment, that he then drew out those ideas about what he then eventually went on to make this very famous novel from. Okay, I shall just scooch around slowly. If we move round to Pathway 1, 2021, I shall, these pieces, again, this is much more of a, again, going back to almost like the cube pieces, this is quite a formal initial exploration about ideas around creating a formal structure, in this case, the square of the geometric shape that's there, and each one of those geometric shapes is broken up, and it's, I relate the ideas of the formal structures of our lives, where we get up, we eat, we go to work, we come back, we go to bed and we sleep. Those are formal elements within our lives, but within those lives, things happen, and this is where this structure gets broken up, and from those moments and events in people's everyday lives, other things happen, and there's a crescendo, and there's an effect of positive and negative things that are coming off those one individual moments. And say for like, people are going to work, and there's a mundane regularity of their work, and it's more a question of something happening, a gossip over the water fountain at work, somebody's sleeping with somebody else, or somebody's had a car accident, or something's happened. There's a moment, there's an event that's happened. But also with these works, I quite like the idea of them being almost like a plan view of a cityscape. And there's the hub and the beat of the city, and the movement and the different zones within that work, and there's different events and happenings within the structure of the work. So these are quite new in what I'm doing, these pathway pieces, and they're also quite open to move forward in different directions, which I think is something that's gradually developed over the years of developing work.
Stuart,
yes,
I've got a question for you.
Yep.
From Linda Connolly. She's asked, could you please let me know if the works are reliefs in boxes or if they're raw on the wall?
If the what, the reliefs in boxes?
Yeah, I think the way you're viewing it now.
Each one of these pieces is mounted on board. which is hung on the wall with a split batten mount. I have in the past put some of these works into acrylic boxes, if that's what she's talking about, I'm not certain, but into acrylic boxes to frame them, to keep dust away and things like that. People are concerned about those things, but these are yeah. Does that answer the question?
I think so, but Linda, do type in the box if you've got more questions.
Perfect. Shall I move through to the other room? Is the camera on me, Lizzie, or is it on the work? Okay, I'll move down to this other event work, which is called Everyone Sang, based around the poem by the author Siegfried Sassoon. Siegfried Sassoon is a war poet, and this particular work is I feel quite emotional about this piece because it feels like we're sort of moving out of a dark period where lots of people have lost loved ones and moving forward into a positive, lighter, brighter future. And with this particular piece that's based on the poem Everyone Sang, Siegfried Sassoon wrote about his experience of coming out the trenches where he was surrounded by death, squalor, depression, horror, all the dark things you could possibly, and great loss, all the dark things you could imagine in life. But when his platoon was released, or relieved, should I say, and they started to walk out of that dark place of loss, all of a sudden everybody started singing, and that lightness and that champion of the human spirit being able to sort of move forward and let go of the horrors of war in this particular case, and gradually move forward into this lighter, brighter place. And again, with this work, the individual letters from the first 10 words of this poem are randomly scattered around. If I can find some, there we go. Find them on there. There's that one. There we go. The individual letters are scattered around the work, and for me, it's quite a poignant work at the moment as we come out of lockdown, out of this period of loss for a lot of people, and we all hopefully move forward to a much brighter, more stable future than we've been through recently. Moving on to the next event piece. This piece is based on the poem Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats, which he wrote about his experience of hearing a nightingale. This is one of the stories around the backing of it, where he went visiting a friend and was staying at the friend's house, and outside the window of his bedroom was each night when the light was going down, the nightingale would sing. And I've tried to capture something of the moment of the darker colours, being as the light fades and then the colours go towards darkness, along with some of the colours of the nightingale bird itself, to sort of replicate that idea and that feeling of a moment when this nightingale sang every single night to him and forced him into that, or pushed him into that idea of writing that poem about it. And again, the letters are scattered around to sort of pull you to that moment of experience.
I've had a question, just to pause a bit more slowly on the letters and really up close, right, okay, so we can see.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't certain at what point I was my camera was live or there was other images. Let me have a look. Try and find. No, here we go.
Thanks.
Let me find. Where's that dark one? Okay, there we go. We go on to there. You see one of the letters there, hopefully. And I should move around. But yeah, it's the letters from the first 10 words usually. So we see if we find that one over there. On the back of there. Is the camera picking up that, Hannah?
Yes, yeah, thank you. We can see them.
Yeah, lovely. There's one down. There we go. There we go. Okay, I shall just move around to this piece. Is actually the title of the show itself, which is Brave New World. based on a novel by Aldous Huxley, who's an Oxford graduate. And again, although these works, apart from actually the poetry works, are tied quite tightly into the actual poems, but the books are a lot more about the author's life. So if you look at Aldous Huxley's life, he was a guy who from a very privileged background. Let's face it. He went to Eton College. He wanted to be a doctor. He was very bright. Wanted to be a doctor, study medicine, but he got an eye infection, which made he went blind in one eye. And from that, he then went on to study English literature, which obviously changed the path of his entire life. And whilst he was studying, obviously the Second World War broke out, and he went to sign up for the army, but they wouldn't have him because he was blind. So he wasn't allowed to join that. So it was again another moment when his life shifted again from that single moment of going blind. He couldn't join the army and possibly been killed. He then went and worked for a chemical company in the northeast of England. And I've lost you guys. Are you still there? Oh, there
Yes,
we go.
we're here.
Right, can you hear me? Right, okay. I lost you for a brief moment then. Yeah, he then went to work at a chemical company in the northeast of England, where that environment of a very controlled, clean, clinical, everything was every aspect of their life was under control. And it was from that experience that he then went on to write Brave New World. So these balls and individual pops and moments of the author's life that then allows them to pull the 26 letters that we've all got access to, but frustratingly, we aren't sitting down writing that great novel, although some of you might be doing, I don't know. But yeah, so it's quite playful. Again, the letters are there hidden around for people to find and engage with that backstory beyond the visual dance of what they have with the formal work that's there. Okay, if I should move over to, I've done a little collection here of works on paper, which are acrylic and watercolor on paper, and they are related. So I've just seen a question. All right, they're related to the pathway pieces, but there are much more. One of the things I found when I left art school is if you look at the cube pieces, they're a very tight formal engagement with what it is to look at a piece of work and the history of that piece of work, and I felt very conscious and very rigorous about what that should be, and my work should be purely around that. But then as you leave college and you allow your work to sort of breathe and become its own thing, and that formal engagement, that's the core of where my practice comes from, and therefore that's where the language that I use to express these ideas comes from, this formal engagement of surface support object within art and personal engagement within the moment. So these pathway pieces are again they come from the pathway piece, but they're allowed to breathe and they slowly develop into their own thing. And again, like with these two pieces here that are on the wall here, they're pertaining to a formal structure, and the watercolor that's in between the geometric acrylic paintings are. Sorry, Lizzie, did you say something?
Stuart, sorry, we've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Might be a good time to ask if that's okay.
Yeah.
The first one is from Gavin. How do the colours relate to the moments and events?
Well, it's the colours are in. There's several layers to the colours. The colours are about. They're there for me to allow that initial engagement of visual dance and to bounce about, and somebody's life, even like the suicide idea behind Wordsworth's early life, his life isn't full of that suicide. His life is full of bright, engaging moments as well as very dark moments. And it's the oh, hang on, I just lost you then. There we go. Am I back? There we go. Yeah, there's well, for example, I mean, it varies. Like this work, the Seek Soon work is very much trying to play with that idea of coming from dark to light. So you've got the transition from the left to the right as the colours progress. And again, I try and with this particular one, the Ode to a Nightingale, colours from the bird are in there. I've tried to capture some of the colours from the dark. As the sun goes down, the colours start to get darker tones and are less bright, but the sun is still there, so there's little pops about there. And it's also about me creating something visually engaging to pull people in, to look at it and to enjoy and to get to grips with what's going on, and to encourage people to look more and to allow their eye to wander across. So I find with these, there's a definite plan for me to use colours to draw the eye around the work, and different patterns and different colours will pop out depending on how long you've been looking at it. From the light ones initially probably grab you, and then the dark patterns will eventually sort of move across. So they're not necessarily like Lord of the Flies here. They're not necessarily like oh, this dark bit here near the end. Although there is, to be honest with you, although I read Lord of the Flies as a kid, I listened to it on audiobook again, but when I was making this particular work, and the dark bit towards the end and the bright red is towards, I was thinking of Piggy's death right near the end, and then the bright red of not just blood, but also of rescue, and the brighter colour coming in there, because they're actually rescued moments, you know, later after Piggy's been murdered by the nasty choir boys.
Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I've got another great question here from Linda. There's a sense of synchronic gravity. Some of the spheres levitate above and some below a varying horizontal line. The idea of the writing line is present as a sculptural concern. Do you feel that and colour is a painterly concern? And the process of looking at the works links with the process of reading along a series of lines.
Yes, really good points actually. Yeah, there's a grid structure, and there is. I actually thought about leaving gaps, which I might do at some point in the future. Leaving gaps in between collections of balls, which could be more very symbolic of sentences, and there is that sort of grid-like form is very much like a page of words. But also there's a formal sculptural element to these works, particularly when you look at the side. I specifically chose to put these on, I suppose, the little plinths, the little tiles, like individual plinths. It allows the ball to have a position in space and a relationship to something in particular, which is the surface area of that tiled surface. So, and it's very much about moving backwards and forwards. So there's very much a sculptural element about that, and also about when you look at down the side of the work, there's a breaking of that idea, the formal idea of painting being the flat front surface. There's not just the flat surface of the support, but there's also a surface here which is broken by the balls coming away from the front edge of the tiles. So it's denying painting, but the individual balls for me are about that initial contact between artists and materials. This is where the idea of using balls has come from. That initial contact between artists and materials, when that first daub of paint, using a brush or whatever the artist is using, when that first daub of paint was onto the canvas, it's a contact, it's a moment, it's an event that's happened, and it's within from that idea of contact that these balls have evolved. I mean, I initially did a piece when I was at Manchester that was it was about that contact between artists' materials, and it was a white canvas bag that I about 4 foot square that I filled up with one side with pigment covered red balls, and the other side was pigment covered tiny polystyrene blue balls. So the type of ball that you get in a beanbag that you sit on. And I put it in this room that was completely white, and I ran in, leapt into the air, landed on it, and this colour exploded around the room. And it was about that moment of contact between artists and materials. And that, from doing that performance piece, I suppose, that led on to me looking at ideas of moments of contact. And I did a piece that was called Thursday, which every single person I came into contact with on that particular Thursday, I asked them to pick 3 numbers that related to amount of colour, what colour it was, and how far away from the wall it was. And this is when I was studying at Manchester, and I came to a whole load of people throughout the day, probably about 50 or 60 people, from travelling on the train into Manchester, all the people I met throughout the day, and going home to visit my parents. And then those translated into, I did a piece that was on these glass test tubes, and each test tube was filled up with various amounts of colour, and the test tube was on a little bracket coming out of the wall. There was at various distances, and it's from that idea of moments that then these pieces have eventually translated a few years later into these individual balls, different distances, different sizes. It's different moments. And I mean, a prime example is like throughout the whole day, there was only one guy who refused to give me 3 numbers. And it was the guy who worked on the ticket barrier at Oxford Road Station in Manchester. And fortunately, in the batch of test tubes I bought, there was one that a faulty test tube with a little hole in the bottom. So he became that one, this vacuous test tube. But yeah, so I hope that somewhat answers the question there. Was that the one question, was it? Lovely. Okay, I'll just whiz round into some of the other this. If we come round to the entrances, you come in through the Zoological Gallery. There's the front door. I've got some more works on paper here that have been framed up, and again, these are quite playful works that again play with the idea of a formal structure being broken up, and little individual moments that are little moments of event and happening within the formal structures. I'll just slowly go around so you can get a look at some of these really nice small pieces. This is one of my favorites, I must admit. I love this one. I have to take it with me. And then there's another one there. And I think we've got most of them covered. There's just one more to show in the main room, which is on the little plinth here. There we go. Okay, is there any more questions for everyone? Please feel free to ask, or it's fine if there's no more questions.
I think that's been really fantastic, Stuart. I'm always so impressed by your work, and I know that it takes a lot of time for each one because they are so labour intensive, and I think that's worth pointing out. We're so grateful that Stuart has found the time to put together this body of work, because he's so often working on larger scale commissions that the work literally goes straight from the studio onto a client's wall. And it's wonderful to be able to have this experience of seeing this body of work and seeing the connections between your work, Stuart. I wondered if you have any particular books that you're thinking about working on at the moment, and how it is that you select your subject in that sense.
Do you know what, the book I'm reading at the moment is I'm currently reading the chess book, because I watched that Queen's Gambit on TV. I got very excited about chess. I've been playing chess recently, so I'm reading the chess book. But I've been mainly looking at I might do a Charles Dickens book next, because I've done a couple of his, which I really love his. I've been to the museum for him down near the Slade, actually. And he's a fascinating character, so I might do one of these books again soon. But yeah, so in terms of choosing them, I tend to look through and find a book that I fancy having to read because I like to read the books or listen to the books while I'm making some of the work as well on audiobooks, because the works are quite labour intensive. They do take a lot of time on my own in the studio, so I go through hundreds of audiobooks whilst I'm making work, which is great fun, I must admit. And it's also finding out who the authors are and what their backstories are. Yeah, like William Golding, his backstory, that getting that eye infection, how that all changed his life path, his life path, was really interesting. You know, of how that happened and how his life changed. So he's finding things like that that will then lead me to do maybe one or two pieces about the books that author's written.
I think that's quite interesting that you're also looking at people who've had, you know, different life, as we all do, like different life events, because that's something also that happened to you with your sort of relatively late turn to becoming an artist. We've just posted the link. I don't know if you want to say anything about it, Stuart, but we posted the link to the article from Ox in a Box, which says a bit more about that.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk a bit briefly about that?
I don't know if you want to say, people might not know, it might be nice just to touch on it briefly, and I think Martin Kemp's also got a question, but so if we come to you in a bit, Martin, if that's okay. Yeah,
sure. It's when I was 18, I did my A levels, and then I went off joined the police cadets in London, because I love the idea of going out catching the bad guy and also helping people as well. That's why I wanted to do it. And London looked like, from outside, coming from a small market town in the northwest, London looked like there was lots of thieves down there to go and catch. So I went down to London. But during that time, I did uniform work. I worked in the crime squads, robbery squad, drugs, burglary squad, sex offenders unit, racial incidents unit, and but I got disillusioned with it. It became much more of a I didn't feel like I was doing myself justice or other people justice, because I was running around ticking boxes and being more concerned about avoiding not ticking a particular box rather than investigating something thoroughly. And the amount of work that was coming through was a ridiculous level. And I was confronted with my own mortality during that period of questioning what I was doing. So when my appendix burst and I was in hospital post-operation, and I looked at my life and I said, I asked myself, am I happy with where I am? And have I really pushed myself to try and do something that I want to do? And the answer was no. And that came from the idea of when the National Lottery first started in the 1990s. Everybody asked, what would you do if you won? And I said, well, I'd go to art school. And I thought about that, and I thought, right, okay, I wasn't happy with the work, I wasn't happy with the girlfriend, and I thought, well, how can I change that? And I thought, well, I had a little bit of positive equity in the house that I was buying at the time. I thought I can go to art school. So that was pretty much the end of that career, and the start of another career, which was in 2000 that I went off. And I went from London as far north as I could to Carlisle, because I like the idea of having to wander around the Lake District for a year. And then I went to Manchester, got more and more interested in contemporary art and excited about it. And I was one of those typical mature students who was over the top excited about everything that was going on in relation to art. Could not get enough of it, which I'm sure annoys the life out of everybody. But it was fantastic. And from Manchester, I went on to the Slade to do my master's degree, and then onwards from there, straight from there. I had a great start, selling loads of work. Then the credits crunch hit, which was tough going, and then everything picked up again, going really well. And then we got coronavirus. So it's been a fun journey, very exciting moments, very exciting doing big commissions all around the world. Hong Kong, Singapore, New York, Canada, Florida, California, Belgium, France, all around the place. So it's been, I've thoroughly enjoyed it also up to date, even though there have been very stressful times, and I feel like I've been very, very lucky to get through particularly this period when all the art fairs are shut, lots of galleries have been shut. But I was fortunate enough to get a really big commission come through in Washington DC that actually went ahead. You know, so these things, these lucky moments make a big difference in your life. So I hope that gives people a little bit of an insight.
Thank you, Stuart. I think, Martin, you've got a question. Don't know if you want to unmute yourself.
I need to unmute myself, which is exactly what I'm doing. Yeah, it's slightly odd because I'm sitting about 300 yards away, but not in the gallery.
All right.
Feel to it. Terrific work. Just looking at it and getting, you know, visual and sound things out of it. I thought they looked like a cross between a computer memory board and a Bach sonata.
Yeah.
That kind of musical quality and structural quality. What I'm struggling with a bit is how the spectator goes from fascination with that sort of visual music, if I can call it such, to the literary and other content. How does the spectator do that? Do you provide them with instruction about Aldous Huxley, or what's the key to stepping from the attractive form into the content?
Yeah, no, I mean the point, the direction for the viewer for that is one from the title. Also, there's descriptions of the work and how to access it. And do you know, I remember seeing, I can't remember the name of the artist now. I remember doing, I went on all those tours around the Tate Modern. Do you know the free tours that you can get? And they'll take you around and show all this stuff. This was before I went to do my degree. And I remember seeing a work by a South American female artist who it was a wardrobe that was full of concrete. And there was a chair shoved into it and a desk. And I remember glancing at it and thinking, well, that's a pile of crap. No, that's just a concrete filled wardrobe. You know, I can't get anything beyond that. But then the guide taking us around told us the story of the wardrobe belonged to a young boy in I think it was Colombia, who the drug cartels thought he'd grassed them up to somebody. He had nothing to do with it. It was a young lad who was studying to go try and better himself. And he was subsequently went missing and was murdered in the jungle nearby because they thought he was this grass to the drug cartel. And it was the artist's attempt to take the functionality away from the wardrobe, the desk, and the chair, and setting them all in concrete, denying that functionality of everyday objects. Yeah. And it's so without that story behind it, it is just lumps of concrete and a wardrobe and nothing. So it's giving people, like I say, I like my work to work on different levels, and if somebody looks at it and sees just a delightful visual dance and game and a playful thing in front of them, that's fine. But if somebody buys a piece of work, they've got time to sit with it, they've got time to read that little bit of text that opens up the story and the ideas and the conceptual ideas behind something that's come out of a formal look at painting in terms of surface support, object hub, engagement between artists and materials. So there's all those different levels, different stories, different ways to come into it, different levels to enjoy that. You know, that's how I sort of deal with that jump between the two.
Okay, thanks. Yep.
Thank you. Good question, though.
It's a big question, across the whole range of art. Obviously, we crucifixion and the Renaissance is a slightly different thing in terms of the knowledge of the text and the content. There's a lovely cartoon which I've used once or twice in the New Yorker by an artist whose name I've tragically forgotten. And there are a series of paintings hanging on the wall. The first one is a landscape, and they gradually become more abstract and conceptual. These hang on the wall. The label for the landscape, the first one is very tiny. By the time he gets to the conceptual work, it's an enormous essay as the label.
Oh, right, yes. Well, very apt. Yeah, that says it perfectly, absolutely perfectly, yeah. And it's like you say, you know, you look at the Renaissance works, unless you've read the Bible, it's people hanging about on a bit of wood in the air, isn't it? You know, so it's a mother and child rather than this historic biblical stories that have got, you know, great emotive stories behind them. So it's although it's much more of a I suppose pictorially they can engage just with human suffering without knowing the stories. So it's a different way of looking at it without the Bible stories behind it all. But yeah, but I love that. I love that story of the words game, this big essay at the end of when the abstract works there, because you do need to have all that story to get every little element out of it. Yeah.
So I'll be round to the gallery, as I'm only 300 yards away, and I'll enjoy looking at them in due course.
Yeah, because they are quite sculptural. There's a real, they come alive when you see them in person. So great. Thanks for coming down as well. Yeah. And
thank you, Stuart, for that. I was going to say it's wonderful that we can Zoom, but there is nothing like seeing these works in the flesh, to get the sort of three-dimensional sense of them and to kind of discover the letters as well. And they are really playful, and I think they really do reward first-hand viewing, especially frontality as well, which changes colour and all sorts as you move across the work. They really do reward being seen in the flesh. I don't know if there are any other questions. Now's your chance. But if not, you can always email me. It's lizzie@zuleikagallery.com, or Hannah or Camilla, who you've probably got emails as well. So we'd be happy to answer your questions afterwards, and happy to welcome you to the gallery if you're able to come here. And it just leaves me to thank you all for joining us, and to Stuart for taking the time to talk us through his exhibition. And it's on until, I was going to say, it's until the 14th of June. So if you are able to come by, it'd be lovely to see you. But thank you all for joining us today.